Yeah, so I just looked it up to see how many people actually do visit the Statue of Liberty. A little bit more than a couple thousand. So 4.3 million people annually visit it.
So I wonder how many people will stop by the old Governor's Island then.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff.
All right, everybody, here is what is trending in timber this week. We're going to start off with the largest mass timber project in New York, the $700 million Governor's Island project. Then we're going to talk about some great things that Tye Farrow is doing in the hospital world. We're going to touch on some tariff situations, the latest news, what's happening, what it means for mass timber. And then we're going to wrap with some mass timber ski resort stuff and then Under Armour's new headquarters. So to kick things off, we're going to talk about that big project in New York. So this is the $700 million Governor's Island project, which will be the largest mass timber project in New York. It's going to break ground in 2026. There was a big interview that the New York City Mayor Eric Adams did talking about it. And so here's what he had to say. So nestled in New York Harbor between Brooklyn and Manhattan, the 400,000 square foot redevelopment remains on track to break ground next year. So they talk about the size of it, where it's at, the people that are involved. We'll link this article down below, but you can see from the pictures like how cool this is going to be. There's a lot of pavilion structure in here, like community spaces, and we've touched on that before. But it's kind of looking to me to be a little bit more of a sector that's evolving in the industry, is like these outdoor pavilions, these meeting spaces, these community hubs, which is great for mass timber. And this is going to be the biggest one in New York, part of a $700 million project. So
Well, not to
that's
mention, it'd be right down the road, or I guess right down the bay from the Statue of Liberty, which would be just the most iconic thing you could ever be next to.
totally. I mean, you're going to have thousands of people, maybe even tens of thousands of people like visiting this every year. So it's more exposure for mass timber. And I talk about this in like, relative to PDX, right? Like how many people fly through PDX and look up at the roof and say, wow, you can build buildings like this with mass timber. I think this is also going to be something along the same lines there.
Yeah, so I just looked it up to see how many people actually do visit the Statue of Liberty. A little bit more than a couple thousand. So 4.3 million people annually visit it.
So I wonder how many people will stop by the old Governor's Island then.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. All right. Well, you want to wrap it up there and head on over to a Tye Farrow article?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Tye Farrow is always unveiling some of the largest projects in the world. And one of the largest projects that he unveiled not too long ago, about a month ago. So, Farrow Partners and Rubenstein Ofer, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, have been selected to design one of the world's largest new medical centers for one of the global top 10 rated medical research organizations. The Negev Health City Medical Center will cover 3 million square feet and provide 1,900 hospital beds. And so here's just like a quick representation or rendering of what it looks like. And if you spy with your little eye and you look off into the distance and you know Tye Farrow, then you'll recognize that there's some serious mass timber in the background already. There will be, biophilic design is going to be the backbone of this project. And I don't know when the unveiling is supposed to happen, but if you go over to his website, you can start recognizing what Tye Farrow, he's already world renowned for. This is the Butterfly Cancer Ward in Jerusalem, the Helmsley Cancer Center in Jerusalem, 2,200 beds.
So he's got tons of experience in the healthcare hospital sector already, and he wrote an entire book on how the environments that you are surrounded by affect your physical and mental health and well-being and healing. And so if you read into what Tye's known for doing into this new project, like you can probably bet that there's going to be some serious mass timber components in there.
Absolutely. And see, I'm getting lost with all of his medical facilities. This is the Herzog Medical Center. I'm trying to get back into the Rubenstein Ofer. So I want to give you an idea of the size and scale, this massive, massive development here.
Yeah, that looks like several dozen buildings. Well, they said 1,900 hospital beds. You don't house that in a
Right.
small facility.
So it looks like an estimated cost of construction estimated US $1.2 billion or 1.2 billion euro. Hospitals are the largest consumers of water by double or any building type. The design will harvest select portions of the hospital's wastewater, recycle and treat it for use in creating the largest new public horticulture park in the country, focused on semi desert plants. So even on top of all of these buildings, they become open walkways and parks where you can pop outside from, like, do a little physical therapy walk and pop down inside. And that's what Tye Farrow is known for, is building these superstructure neighborhoods that are all interconnected, but most importantly through, looking through the eyes of nature, like feeling like that you're in the forest and having big open windows and big trees and just being connected in a space, and instead of feeling so secluded with dark, cold concrete type of walls.
Totally. Yeah, well, I'm excited to watch that project progress and see where it goes. I imagine that's going to be a multi-year endeavor. Um, Coming back on this side of the old pond, uh, the big splashy news that we're seeing everywhere right now is, again, of course, tariffs. How's that in fact impacting everything, but specifically for this podcast episode, how's it going to affect mass timber? So we don't know if these things are going to go into effect long term, short term, at what severity, et cetera. But the fact remains that as of today, March 3rd, uh, they're going back into effect tomorrow, so the 4th. And I've talked to several different people on both sides of the border about what this means, where we're at, the history of everything. And so I kind of wanted to just give a quick rundown and summation of that article. I'll link that down below for anybody that wants to read like the details and nitty gritty on it. But basically, in a nutshell, the U.S. imports about 30% of its softwood lumber consumption, and I think I'm wrong in this number, but it's 25% of that 30, or excuse me, 25% of the 30% that we import comes directly from Canada. So we are a huge consumer of softwood lumber from Canada, and there's also some benchmarking about in the lumber futures industry that the benchmark for that is Canadian timber, and so the price of Canadian timber definitely has a huge pricing impact on softwood across everything that we do, not just in the Canadian market. And so there's already softwood lumber agreements in place that have some existing duties on Canadian lumber that's coming in. Everything that we're talking about now for this tariff situation is outside of that scope. So additional tack on type stuff. And the the nuts and bolts of it is like, hey, tariffs are here. They're here to stay or to go, long term, short term. We don't really know, but it will have impacts in the mass timber industry. If you take mass timber out of the equation, you just talk about tariffs in general. There's a great little example about what tariffs do for all products in the category. So in 2017, there was a tariff on, I believe it was South Korean washing machines. So let's just say a washing machine was sold for $1,000 here. If they imposed a 10% tariff on washing machines, so washing machines coming in um, from across the country are now $1,100. Well, the domestic manufactured washing machines, they didn't stay at $1,000. They also increased, maybe a little bit cheaper, to 1090, but they definitely increased in price. And then goods and services that are directly tied to those tariffed goods also increased in prices. And so, like in this case, dryers. So dryers were not, they did not have a tariff on them. They were completely separate. But because they're sold in pairs and in tandem, and everybody says, hey, when you think washer, you think dryer, those prices also went up, even though there was no direct tariff impacted. And so some people that I'm talking to expect to see the same thing in mass timber, right? So if you have 25% of the softwood lumber consumption that you're seeing come in at a higher prices you're going to see across the board. And so what does that do for the mass timber industry long term? I don't know. I'm not the right person to answer that. There are some very smart people that you could reach out to and talk to. For the article, I interviewed Hardy Wenzel from Think Mass Timber. He's been in the lumber world for a very, very long time. And then he's from Canada. And then I also interviewed Tyler Farrrow from Farrrow Engineered Wood, the folks that produce mass ply panels, and got a domestic producer's perspective on it. So just putting that on the radar that everybody says they're coming back. What I thought, what I found was interesting was in Forest Economic Advisors news summary that came out. They also talked about something that was related to tariffs, but a little bit ancillary. So they talked about Trump signing a second executive order that will focus on streamlining the regulatory permitting process, allowing for more harvesting of timber salvage. And so one of the big contention points, if you will, between U.S. and Canadian forestry operations is just the access and availability to stumpage, right? So if one party has better access to cheaper stumpage, then that means that their product coming out the other side is going to be less expensive. And so I think what they're trying to do with this executive order is kind of get to the root competitive advantage for the U.S. forestry folks and say, hey, how can we increase access to fiber for domestic producers so that they can compete on a more level playing field with the Canadian folks. So we'll see how all that shakes out, but those are important headlines if you're in the mass timber industry to be aware of because they will affect you. What do you got, Nick?
Speaking to prices a little bit, I think people need to recognize that when it comes to lumber, sometimes the price is just the price. And unfortunately, or fortunately, what we saw through the pandemic was two historic highs and two historic lows, crashes in the dimensional lumber market in the US and Canada that has never been before seen in history, ever. The main point that I'm trying to kind of get across the table is it didn't matter if it was at the height of the prices of in history, it was still selling like hotcakes because it's almost like, lumber is the backbone. I mean, small scale single family homes in America are built out of it. In Canada, they're like the pallet manufacturer world. A lot of our society is built on it. But what's interesting is like these tariffs, it's shaking the world up and it's scaring a lot of people. And unfortunately, it most likely will raise the price of lumber in the end. And so, but the thing about it is if you take a look at back at history, it's still sold all the way through and all the way to the bottom. The people were writing it to the top and writing it to the bottom, and it's just kind of an interesting concept that prices. It doesn't really matter what they are. We understand that we want them to be cheaper as an end user or an end buyer, but these tariffs sometimes don't really necessarily have the effect that maybe people think.
Yeah, as far as like purchasing volume for sure, but like you said, those costs do get passed on to the end consumer or buyer, purchaser, developer, whatever. And so I think the conversation in the mass timber world is even if timber is still being purchased and used in whatever form, the costs do go up for the end user. And just to be clear, there is imports and stuff on inputs coming in that are not mass timber too. So you're talking steel, concrete, the components that go into them. Steel and concrete are both very heat intensive manufacturing processes, and what heats everything, oil has a tariff that's coming in. And so it's not like just mass timber is being singled out or just lumber. Like the building industry as a whole is going to be affected. And so how does that play into the competitiveness of mass timber versus steel or concrete? I don't know. But there will be some changes that are coming.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Well, we want to pivot on over to there's an incredible project that just got done out in Montana, and KLNA reported on it on the LinkedIn, and we caught wind of this. It looked like that it was completed in 2024. So this is the Iglesias. I don't know. Are you better at pronouncing things than me? So this is a gorgeous, beautiful project. So if you don't know what the Yellowstone Club is, first off, I looked up what membership fees are the Yellowstone Club. This is in Bozeman, Montana, and it's a premier club. So it looks like that membership dues are about $400,000 initial if you got a little bit of pocket change, with over $40,000 a year in annual membership. Oh, by the way, you also need to build a luxury home at no less than $4 million on their property. So if
So just pocket change.
a little bit of pocket change. Maybe you have some old family money that you can throw around. When I'm trying to get back to this, so this is their new Yellowstone Club on mountain restaurant. So they built a mountain restaurant for their club members called the Iglees. I'm probably butchering this for somebody. It serves as a base camp for 1,000-acre ski hill and a summer recreation expansion. Located atop the club's first gondola, the mid mountain location boasts panoramic views of Montana's Gallatin Mountain Range, which, I mean, as me and you know, we're both born and raised in Montana, so we're a little biased, but it's hard to beat the beauty of Montana out in kind of like the ruggedness of like nature. And so this is the epitome of luxury where you're not really, you're not tenting it anymore on the trail trying to fight off grizzlies. You do that behind glass, and your wine cellar here.
Well, I'm really glad to see mass timber in that, because if you're on a mountaintop, doesn't matter if you're in the Yellowstone Club or your local ski hill, like seeing timber is like a great complement to that environment. And also, I love seeing um, the resort hotel accommodations industry start to embrace mass timber. I know there's many projects in Colorado and Denver using mass timber as well for applications like this, but also hundreds of hotel rooms, etc. And so I think the resort hospitality industry is definitely embracing mass timber at a pretty rapid rate from what I've seen.
Yeah, we're seeing that across the board. I mean, it's tough to beat it. It's lighter, it's stronger, it's more beautiful. It's the trees. If you go into a ski lodge and you're amongst the mountains and the forests, you still want to feel that. Like once you're in the lodge. Here's a quick little blurb here. So, to minimize the project's carbon footprint, to facilitate a challenging high altitude construction at 9,573 feet above sea level, CCY, and this is CCY Architects, they design the roof structure with cross laminated timbers, or CLT, which stands for cross laminated timber, supported with glue lam columns. And you can see these glue lams right here that are kind of in the shape of maybe like an upside down pyramid, supporting that cross laminated timber. And then here's their custom gondola that shoots you right into it, just so you can have a nice little a couple feet off of you have a 15 feet into the cold and then swooped into the restaurant. So this was completed in 2024, the Yellowstone Club in Montana, 14,000 square feet, mid-mountain restaurant. And I believe the team, CCY Architects, KLNA Engineers and Builders, Jackson Contractor Group. I know there was a lot more that I'm missing here. I'll have to look them up later, but yeah, this is a
Yeah.
gorgeous facility in Montana that they just unveiled. So I don't know if we need to be Yellowstone members. Do you got about a $500,000 to burn?
Not necessarily. I mean, I could sell everything I own and have $500,000 to burn, but then I'd have to live on the gondola.
All right, maybe next year. All right, so what do you got?
I think I want to hear about that Under Armour facility that you were talking to me about.
All right, let's do it. So Under Armour is Under Armour, the clothing brand, the upside down X's or whatever it is. But they have had this project that's been steadily being built. And there has been an update by Aspect Structural Engineers talking about this field just isn't for play. It's also a space to test new products and gear. Plus, it steps away from the new 280,000 square foot mass timber building that's home to Under Armour's global business headquarters. Located on the Athletics brand's Covington campus in Baltimore, Maryland, the building itself features a track and a field area, basketball court, and a flagship retail store. So here's a couple updates of just the sheer size and scale of what's going on. January 2024, so these are about 2 to 3 months old. but here's the end rendering of what it will look like. And here's a little bit of an update of where they are currently, overlooking the harbor. Like, it's just a huge superstructure project it's going to be incredible once it's done.
Yes, sir.
Project team: Under Armour, Binderholz Group, Gensler Architects, Whiting and Turner Contracting Company, Seagate Mass Timber, Thornton Tomasetti, Aspect Structural Engineers provided design assist services, Mass Timber Specialty Engineering, and fabrication modeling. So, big team, world-class stars putting together a world-class project here. So it's going to be cool to see what happens when it's done.
Yes. And so you'll actually see a lot of those guys out at the Mass Timber Group Summit in Denver. So if you guys are looking to get in the right room with the decision makers, people that are serious about mass timber, and you're looking for that 400 level education, no 101 intro level stuff, like this is a summit for you. And tickets are on sale now when this comes out. Tye Farrow, that we just talked about, is going to be a keynote speaker, building on his presentation from last year in the biophilic response. How are we designing these buildings so that you have a physical benefit to your body, speaking to developer owners, clients, tools for client conversations, if you will, about the benefits for mass timber. So tickets are live now, guys, and then the prices do go up every single month. So get the early bird rates while they're hot, and we'll see you in Denver.
See you there.